Good evening, audience, and ahoy to all you out there in the world listening to tonight's live broadcast. Welcome to the J Saki program, where you all tune in to hear me jabber a little bit about movies. Unless I decide to randomly talk about a book. And tonight it's a book. Over the weekend, I read the entirety of The Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. My brother came for a visit and we read it over a bottle of wine. And that brings us to the sponsor of tonight's episode, Z. Alexander Brown Whiskey Barrel Aged Cabernet Sauvignon. It's the perfect wine to drink while being enlightened by communist literature. So, the Communist Manifesto. It was first published in 1848, and it was commissioned by the Communist League in London. And I guess this is the book that was made for mass production to spread around to radicalize society and the world. So I've always had a general education in Marxism and communism as much as the next guy, but I figured it was time to hear it from the horse's mouth. You know, check the original source in the off chance the Communist Manifesto wasn't actually the ultimate cookbook this whole time. And revolutions were just instigated as a cover to hide the secret recipes that are too good for this world. So here we go. I read the first 15 pages or so, and it read like I thought Marxist communist jargon might read. Don't play a game where you take a shot every time the book says bourgeoisie or bourgeois. You'll be passed out before the 5th page. They said bourgeoisie so many times I had to take a break and do some research on what exactly bourgeoisie was, since it's always been vaguely defined to me. So as best as I can gather, the bourgeoisie translates as in-between class, standing in between the aristocracy, who would be the rich, and then the poor peasants who own little to nothing. That is the J. Saki translation of bourgeoisie. The trouble I had is, for a long time, too many people instinctively said the bourgeoisie was the middle class, and I'm like, in most countries, the middle class is most people, and all politicians make appeals to this voting bloc more than any other, so why this big war against the bourgeoisie? But apparently in this day and age, when the manifesto was written, you were in the minority if you owned a home and or land. That was the minority of people. And Marx and Engels would say these people were responsible for supporting the rich and keeping the peasants in their place. I'm going to try to not be a condescending jerk who talks down to you to remind you about the specifics of communist thought, because apparently I'm so dumb I don't know what bourgeoisie means. I just needed to clear up that one point about how bourgeoisie translated to me and maybe for someone who might find it useful. I went in with the hypothesis that the manifesto was going to read like sweet tea. I suspected that Marx and Engels were going to be persuasively manipulative and be like, our only interest is for the poor, starving peasants, and we defend them against those who oppress them, and I think we can all agree that's a good thing. Because my understanding is there are communist hipsters who take this book very seriously and are manipulated into believing it. So obviously you have to be a wolf in sheep's skin to be so persuasive. But as I continued, it read like something written by a movie villain. Like, it didn't read like, we're just a bunch of saints who care for those in need and just want those who are more fortunate in their wealth to help out a little. It read like, I am the reckoning of civil society. All must burn and bow before me. Marx and Engels don't even have it in them to be like, we just want the rich to pay their fair share. According to them, if you're like that, you're an old socialist and you're too fixated on trying to bring the peasant class into the bourgeoisie by lifting them out of poverty, and how dare you want that? We must have a society where we all become peasants. And I'm like, this sounds horrible. Who would be convinced to support such an evil movement? And they would say if you're a peasant who wants what the bourgeoisie have, then you're getting in the way and you deserve no mercy. Insert Karate Kid joke about enemies deserving no mercy. So pardon me a moment while I do a little Jay Saki reads you the manifesto. These are just some of the paragraphs that I circled and highlighted that I found insightful. And the abolition of this state of things is called by the bourgeois abolition of individuality and freedom. And rightly so. The abolition of bourgeois individuality, bourgeois independence, and bourgeois freedom is undoubtedly aimed at. By freedom is meant, under the present bourgeois conditions of production, free trade, free selling, and buying. Skipping a few paragraphs, and then it goes, in one word, you reproach us with intending to do away with your property. Precisely so. That is just what we intend. Skip another paragraph, and then, you must therefore confess that by individual you mean no other person than the bourgeois, than the middle class owner of property. This person must indeed be swept out of the way and made impossible. And the manifesto does go on to try to justify these statements a little by being like, this sounds terrible, I hear you say, but let me tell you, it's not so terrible. And then they go on to make it sound terrible. But apparently someone thinks these guys are correct. So on a more civil note, it gave me an education in the history of the word socialism. I'm not sure how far back the word dates, but the term socialism is a few hundred years old and it wasn't invented by Marxists or communist parties. There were many socialist movements, and according to the Communist Manifesto, they were all based on some kind of notion of needing to raise the poor up to the bourgeoisie class, so we can all be landowners and all have nice things. And like I said a little while ago, the manifesto condemns such folk. It's like the whole point of Marxist communists is to say being a poor peasant is what you should aim to be. And I'm sure maybe a hipster communist might say that's not quite right, you just have to read it more carefully. And to that I say, please write a better book because that's what it looks like it's saying. Maybe they weren't actually saying that, but my brain was assuming these were smarter guys who saw these ideas would result in everyone being a poor, miserable peasant. I know I just said please write a better book, but maybe I should be thankful it's written like Satan wrote it. Either I'm too smart for this, or maybe I'm just that stupid. Have mercy on me. I'm just a dumb peasant who can't get down with a cause I don't fully grasp. I didn't mention it before, but the publisher notes say reader discretion is advised and reminds the reader that these ideas have led to the destruction of millions of lives. Go figure. So one might say, Jay Saki, I think you went into this book without an open heart, and you were never going to accept it. So why did you read it? I read it for the education audience. I read it for the one time in my life when I'm at a cocktail party and someone says, you need to read the manifesto and get educated, and I can then respond, I have read it. I have indeed read it. Have a good night, everyone.